How's it going, everyone? Today we're going to be diving into 5 of the most terrifying, real-life horror stories that all take place in abandoned buildings. There's something about a place that's been left to rot, to be reclaimed by nature, that just draws people in. But sometimes, what you find inside isn't just dust and decay. Sometimes, these forgotten places are not as empty as they seem, and the people who dare to explore them find out way too late that they should have just stayed home. These stories come from all over, inspired by true submissions from viewers just like you, and from urban legends that have been whispered about for years. They're tales of urban explorers, curious teenagers, and people who just happen to be in the wrong place at the absolute worst time. We've taken these accounts and are retelling them in our own words, to bring you face to face with the horrors that can lurk in the shadows of forgotten structures. So, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and prepare yourself for a journey into the dark and disturbing. Before we get into story number 1, I do want to give a quick shout out. All stories you're about to hear have been retold in our own words. Now, if you are a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you have come to the right place. Let's get started. Our first story takes us back to the 1980s to a group of bored teenagers looking for a thrill. Their target was an old abandoned prison farm, a place locals called the Honor Farm. It had been shut down for years, and the stories about it were the stuff of legend. The main building was a long 2-story structure with barred windows, surrounded by acres of overgrown fields where inmates once worked. The main gate was chained shut, but for a determined group of kids, a gap in the perimeter fence was an open invitation. The narrator, let's call him Mark, and his 3 friends parked their car down the road and slipped through the fence just as the sun began to set. They made their way to the main building, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. The front doors were locked tight, but they found a broken window on the ground floor and carefully climbed inside. The interior was even worse than they imagined. Paint peeled from the walls in long strips. The floor was littered with debris, and a thick layer of dust covered everything. They explored the first floor, moving through what looked like a common area and a mess hall, their flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. Every sound seemed amplified in the dead silence. They were on edge, a mix of fear and excitement fueling them as they decided to head upstairs to check out the cell blocks. It was on the second floor that things took a turn. As they were walking down a long corridor lined with empty cells, Mark's friends suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. At the far end of the hallway, illuminated for just a second by their flashlight beams, was a figure. It was a man, standing perfectly still, wearing a dark hooded sweatshirt. He didn't move, he didn't make a sound. He just stood there, watching them. A cold dread washed over the group. They weren't alone. They immediately turned and ran, scrambling out the broken window, and not stopping until they were back at the car. They tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a homeless person, maybe another explorer. But the stillness of the figure was deeply unsettling. A few weeks later, Mark was reading the local paper when a small article caught his eye. A maintenance crew had made a gruesome discovery. In one of the old outbuildings, they found a circle of decapitated rabbits, arranged in some sort of ritualistic pattern. Mark knew that what they had seen in that hallway was connected to the horrific discovery. They had stumbled upon something truly evil that night. Next up, we have a story from a university student we'll call Sarah. She and her 3 friends were really into urban exploration, always looking for the next abandoned place to check out. Their biggest target was a massive abandoned hospital right in the heart of downtown. This place was a fortress. It had been boarded up for over a decade, and every window and door was sealed with thick plywood. The city had even put up a high fence around the entire property. But for Sarah and her crew, this was just a challenge. They spent weeks scouting the location, looking for any potential weakness, any way in. Finally, they found it. A single loose board on a 3rd-story window, accessible only by climbing up a sturdy drain pipe. One moonless night, they put their plan into action. Dressed in dark clothing and armed with flashlights and a crowbar, they scaled the fence and made their way to the drain pipe. It was a tense climb, but one by one, they made it up to the 3rd-floor ledge. Using the crowbar, they managed to pry the board loose just enough to squeeze through. They dropped into a dark, silent room, the air stale and tasting of dust and antiseptic. The feeling of victory was quickly replaced by an overwhelming sense of unease. This place was huge, a labyrinth of hallways and rooms, and it was pitch black. The silence was absolute, a heavy blanket that seemed to absorb the sound of their own breathing. They began to explore, their flashlight beams dancing across old gurneys, overturned medical equipment, and patient files scattered across the floor. They moved cautiously, room by room, their whispers the only sound in the vast, empty space. They found the old operating theaters, the nursery, and the morgue in the basement, each location more unsettling than the last. As they were making their way back up from the basement, they heard a noise from one of the floors above them. It was a cough, a deep, guttural cough that echoed through the stairwell. They froze, lights off, listening. They had assumed they were alone. Clearly, they were wrong. Slowly they crept up the stairs towards the source of the sound. Peeking around the corner into a long hallway, their lights caught him. A man, who was clearly homeless, was sitting on a dirty mattress in the middle of the hall. He was surrounded by his belongings, and he was staring right at them, his eyes wide with surprise and anger. "Get out!" he screamed, his voice raw and booming in the enclosed space. "This is my house! Get out!" He started to get up, and the students didn't wait to see what he would do next. They turned and bolted, adrenaline coursing through them as they sprinted back towards the window they'd come through, the man's furious screams chasing them down the halls of his claimed territory. This next story involves a place that sounds like it was pulled straight from a nightmare. The storyteller, let's call him Alex, and his friends had heard rumors about an old abandoned mansion at the edge of a forest a few towns over. The legend was that the family who lived there had vanished under mysterious circumstances decades ago, leaving everything behind. The property was supposedly surrounded by a high stone wall, but there was a section that had crumbled, allowing access. One weekend, Alex and his friends decided they had to see it for themselves. After a short hike through the woods, they found the wall and the rumored gap. The mansion that stood before them was gothic and imposing, with ivy crawling up its stone walls. As they stepped onto the property, the first thing they noticed was the statues. The grounds were filled with them. Dozens of stone statues of children, all in strange, unnatural poses. Some were crying, some were screaming, others were contorted in ways that just looked wrong. It was incredibly unsettling, but their curiosity was stronger than their fear. They approached the house and found the front door unlocked, creaking open with a gentle push. Inside, the air was cold and heavy. The grand foyer was filled with more of those disturbing statues, and the walls were covered in bizarre, hand-painted murals depicting nightmarish scenes. It felt less like a home and more like a shrine to something awful. They explored the ground floor, each room more disturbing than the last. In what looked like a child's playroom, the toys were arranged in perfect, neat rows, as if waiting for someone to return. Dust covered everything, suggesting no one had been there in a very, very long time. As they headed up the grand staircase to the second floor, one of Alex's friends let out a sharp gasp. She was pointing back at the foyer. One of the statues, a little girl covering her eyes, now had its hands down by its sides. They all stared, hearts pounding. They had all seen it with its hands over its face just moments before. There was no way it could have moved. It was just a trick of the light, they told themselves, trying to stay calm. But then, they heard it. A faint, childish giggle coming from one of the upstairs bedrooms. That was it. Panic set in. They didn't even think about exploring further. They turned and ran, stumbling over each other to get out of the house. As they burst through the front door and sprinted across the lawn, Alex risked a glance back at the house. In one of the top-floor windows, he swore he saw the silhouette of a small child just for a second before it disappeared. They scrambled back through the wall and didn't stop running until they were deep in the woods, leaving the horrifying mansion and its watching statues behind them for good. Our fourth story comes from a viewer who grew up in a very rural area where everyone knew everyone, and not much ever happened. About a mile down a dirt road from his house was an old farmhouse that had been abandoned for as long as anyone could remember. It was a classic two-story wooden house, paint-peeling porch sagging and windows boarded up. It was a rite of passage for local kids to try and get inside. The storyteller, we'll call him Ben, and his best friend decided it was their turn one summer afternoon. They rode their bikes down the dirt road and easily found a way in through a back door that was hanging off its hinges. The inside of the house was musty and dark, with shafts of sunlight cutting through the gaps in the boarded-up windows. It was filled with old, decaying furniture covered in white sheets, like ghosts waiting in the gloom. They explored the first floor, their footsteps echoing loudly in the silence. It was creepy for sure, but nothing out of the ordinary for an abandoned house. They found the kitchen, the living room, and a small study. After they had seen everything on the main level, they decided to check out the basement. The door to the cellar was in the kitchen, a heavy wooden door that groaned in protest as they pulled it open, revealing a set of steep, rickety wooden stairs leading down into absolute blackness. Ben, being the braver of the two, went first, clicking on his cheap flashlight and pointing it down into the darkness. The beam landed on the damp, dirt floor of the cellar, and that's when he saw it. Standing at the bottom of the stairs, directly in the center of the flashlight beam, was a figure. It was tall, unnaturally so, and stick-thin. It was wearing what looked like a dark, tattered suit, but its most terrifying feature was its complete lack of features. There was no face, no hair, just a smooth, pale expanse of skin where a face should be. It stood perfectly motionless, its long arms hanging limply at its sides. Ben was frozen, unable to process what he was seeing. His friend, who was behind him, yelled, "What is it? What do you see?" The sound broke Ben's paralysis. He didn't answer. He just slammed the heavy cellar door shut, fumbled with the old slide bolt, and locked it. "Run!" he screamed. They scrambled out of the house, not daring to look back, jumped on their bikes, and pedaled faster than they ever had in their lives. Ben never told his friend exactly what he saw at the bottom of those stairs. He couldn't explain it then, and he can't explain it now, but the image of that tall, motionless, faceless figure in the dark is burned into his memory forever. Our final story tonight is about an abandoned school that has since been torn down, but the memory of what happened inside still haunts the people who explored it. Two teenagers, let's call them Jake and Chloe, knew the old elementary school on the edge of town was slated for demolition. They saw this as their last chance to explore a place they had heard so many ghost stories about. One night they slipped through the fence surrounding the property and found an open window that granted them easy access. The school was a maze of dark corridors, the walls covered in graffiti left by previous explorers. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and chalk dust. They made their way through the familiar layout. Classrooms with desks still arranged in rows, a gymnasium with a deflated basketball in the center of the floor, and a cafeteria with trays still stacked by the serving line. It was eerie, but they were having fun, spooking each other and laughing at the strange echoes their voices made. Their adventure took a dark turn when they were exploring the basement, which had housed the boiler room and storage areas. Tucked away in a dark corner, behind a stack of old janitorial supplies, they found a door that wasn't on any of the school's original floor plans they had seen online. It was a heavy metal door with no handle, only a small, barred window. Driven by curiosity, they managed to pry the door open. The room inside was small, concrete, and windowless, and what they saw made their blood run cold. Bolted to the far wall were rusted chains and manacles like something you'd see in a medieval dungeon. On the floor beneath them were dark, reddish-brown stains that they knew, instinctively, were not rust. A wave of pure terror washed over them. This wasn't a storage room, this was a prison. Suddenly, the heavy metal door slammed shut behind them, plunging them into total darkness. Panic erupted as they fumbled for the door, screaming, but it wouldn't budge. Just as they were starting to lose hope, they heard a loud scraping sound from the other side of the door, and it slowly creaked open again. They didn't wait to see who or what had opened it. They scrambled out of the room and sprinted out of the basement, out of the school, and back through the fence. They never went back. A month later, the school was demolished, and whatever secrets that hidden room held were turned to rubble. But Jake and Chloe will never forget the feeling of being trapped in that room, and the chilling realization that they were not the only ones in that abandoned school that night. And that is going to do it for these 5 terrifying tales of explorations gone wrong. It really makes you think twice about stepping foot inside a place that's been forgotten by time. You truly never know what or who you might find waiting for you in the dark. A huge thank you to everyone who has submitted their stories to me. I read every single one, and they are the lifeblood of this channel. These accounts remind us that the world is a far stranger and more frightening place than we can often imagine. If you've had a brush with the unexplained, a terrifying encounter in an abandoned place, or any other strange, dark, or mysterious experience, I would love to hear about it. Please share your stories in the comments section below, or you can send them to me via the email address in the description. I'm always looking for the next chilling tale to share with our community. Your story could be the one that keeps us all up at night in a future video, and that's a pretty cool thing. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you enjoyed these stories and want to hear more, please consider hitting that subscribe button and turning on notifications so you never miss an upload. Again, I want to give credit and inspiration to Nighttime Spooks for some of the incredible stories we retold today. That's all for now. Be safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one. If you enjoyed these stories, please subscribe for more chilling tales.